Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragnix, and this is going to be a little bit different for me. I know I keep on saying that a lot, but this is just going to be a little bit off topic in terms of the Let's Tries, first impressions, all the stuff that I do. This has to do with review scores, and this became topical with Eurogamers dropping review scores. Now, I'm going to put some Dying Light up in the background here, and it's sort of topical because I did do a review, an actual written review over at TechRaptor. It was going to be a video review, and then some of the footage problems that came up with it. I mean, that game, when it came out initially, was laggy in terms of, like, it didn't work well with video recording. So I'm going to put some footage here, and then you can go read that review if you want to get my opinion on it on TechRaptor. But let's talk about review scores. So Eurogamer has dropped their review score system. They were going with sort of a 3-tier, although really it's a 4-tier system. They are going to do a recommended, an essential group, a void group, and then there's going to be the sort of blank one, the one that where it doesn't have any labeling on it. I do want to talk about that because I've seen a lot of people giving it positive praise, and while I do agree there are positive aspects of it, I am concerned with the fact that I think there's positive and negatives coming from that. And I don't think people are talking about the negatives enough because review scores do still have a place within the industry, and I think people don't realize that. But there have been a lot of negatives that have come from review scores. I do like what they're doing over there somewhat, but in the long run, whether it's good or not, that's my question. So they talked about how games are evolving over at Eurogamer, and games are evolving. We have a lot more multiplayer experiences. We also have a lot more day one content and day one problems. This has been a recent trend in the industry, unfortunately, where a game doesn't come out in a very polished form. Back in the old days, in the NES days, Super NES, when you didn't have that delivery system where you could just download a new patch, games were a lot more polished, if not buggy as hell. There were still buggy as hell games, but they were critically, you knew it at that point. But maybe you didn't know it. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde being a prime example. You had to focus on Nintendo Power or some other, written form of review. But generally, and even with like I can think of the Game Boy Advance, games were more polished before they came out. Not so much anymore, and that's obviously caused some problems where you have games, SimCity being the prime example, I think over at Polygon, where its review score fluctuated rapidly after the whole debacle with the DRM and the whole always online component not working for the first day. So there is a problem there. And so Eurogamer has decided, we're going to drop the review score entirely. They used to mean at a glance guide is what they said, that it was a good retrospect of what that game was in comparison to others, and that it doesn't hold true anymore. That I'm concerned with, the way that they worded that, because I'm not entirely sure of their reasoning on that. Now, I do agree that trying to compare games at times, especially off genre, is hard between two games. Like, let's take a comparison. Let's take Metroid Other M and compare it to Hyrule Warriors. Scores on those may be completely different based on the person who's looking at it. It may be compared to who likes the genre more. And so, what exactly does that score mean in that comparison? Well, I always thought that the score became a deciding factor point in terms of, okay, if I'm looking at the same game, like a same genre game, I'm gonna look at 2 FPS games. Maybe that's a good indicator of what to look at. Like if one gets an 8 and one gets a 7, the FPS may be a bit better for me, the 8 than the 7. But obviously, tastes have come a long way than the old days, and experiences have come a long way from the old days. All right, what do I like about the new system over at Eurogamer? That they're only reviewing retail versions. I think that people are getting lost in the whole losing the score thing, and I think that's a huge portion. No preview code will be used to make the formal review, and that I think is even better. than anything else there. The thing is that we've seen this be a huge problem. Assassin's Creed Unity, Halo, the Master Chief Collection, I mean, just Sonic Boom, for all that matter. Even Sonic Boom still has some problems lately. But that's a bold step for a game publisher to take, because they said they will still cover like sort of preview coverage in terms of those review events, but they won't be using it for their final review basis. And I think that's a very wise thing to do, considering that it forces it back onto anybody who is willing to wait for that review. They know they're going to get a better representation of what the experience truly is, rather than everything else. I like that a lot more than Polygon's version. Polygon is going with the provisional review. Well, they'll give a review, but they'll say, well, wait a minute, hold on. We're not going to put this to Metacritic yet, so we're just going to hold off on giving this to Metacritic, but here's a general score. To me, that is more of a cop-out, because that still is giving a score. It's still giving a first impression, and the fact of the matter is word of mouth. It's easier to say recommended over word of the mouth than the score itself. Like, if I say 8 to somebody, oh yeah, Polygon gave that an 8, they're going to interpret that. They may not see that provisional portion of it. So now it won't go up on the Metacritic. I'll go into that whole issue later. It focuses on detail and comprehension for people to read the review. And I think that's a strength. I think that, a lot of things are suited to a certain genre type. I think that's part of the reason why people are watching my videos. I do try to take into account what a game's strength is. And a game can be a 6, a 5, a 7, but if it sells that aspect that you want in it, it may be worth getting. That's the whole reason why I looked at the sort of subjective review score regarding the enhancers on my channel, is the fact that just because I don't like action RPG, or not action RPG, action-based horror games like Evil Within, maybe you do. And maybe that's a bigger factor for you to get the game. So I do agree with that, and I do agree with the details and the comprehension. And when it comes down to it, boiling it down to a single score is bad. In general, there's just way too many factors, way too many biases. We try to be subjective in reviews and first impressions and everything like that, but of course our personal bias is going to come into play. It's just our experience and everything like that. Okay, well, why don't I like Eurogamer's change? Well, here's the problem. It's too simple. The problem is that the way that they're going with recommended, they're going with, essential, and then avoid, and then that blank space. The problem there is that, let's say that 2 games are recommended within a category. Let's say I recommended Monster Hunter 4 and Majora's Mask. If somebody with, limited funds wants to know which game to get, it becomes a lot harder at that point. Now, they can read through both reviews and maybe get a better sense of it, but we also know that people are very, very, I don't want to diss anybody here, but people are wanting information a lot more quickly. And so it's really hard to compare within that genre what exactly a good game is and a bad game is when comparing them against, recommendations at that point. Okay, they're both recommended. Which one should I get more? Read the review? Okay, yeah, but that may not give the entire story. Now, I don't usually use scores to base my reviews in terms of when I did not do this kind of content. So, to me, it's less of a problem there, but I can see where people have problems with it. And again, we're talking about personal bias here. The problem is that a lot of reviews do put personal bias into it. I have a feeling that the recommended portion, like let's say Polygon put this kind of system in place. I've got a feeling that Bayonetta 2 would have been recommended at that point. And that's, I think, part of the problem I have. It doesn't get around the whole bias thing. And while I have no reason to believe that Eurogamer won't do it, I think if that becomes an industry trend, that could be more problematic, especially when the recommendation may be just personal at that point. And that's where I think I'm really keying off of that recommended category, because that to me is just like, oh, we're suggesting you get this game. Maybe the problem there I'm having is that a game can be bad and still be suggestible. I mean, I've done that on the channel where there is some element of it where I do think that it's worth the time for that person, but I usually try to isolate that to if you like XYZ. Here, that may not be the case. It may be recommendation for, oh, it tried something new and it may work for you. I don't know. Why I'm also want to talk about is they won't update reviews, and I'm indifferent on that. The thing is that reviews, I can understand their stance on it. The fact of the matter is, like, the SimCity debacle, yeah, it was a huge problem. The fact that they went from, like, and it wasn't Eurogamer, it went from, like, an 8 to a 4 to a 6 to a 6.5. It's just like, okay, whoever saw the 8 review would have been like, oh, yeah, this is a good game. Of course not. So, but I can understand why they would want to stay their stance. Like, this is our opinion of the game based on what we had on the information at the time. Sort of changing it afterward, it looks like you're going back on your word. But on the other hand, we've seen incidents where a game's status has changed immensely because of some incident. And I'm not even talking about things like day one stuff. I'm talking about, take a look at Ultra Street Fighter 4 on Steam. If you look at the latest reviews, you'll notice that everyone is giving it a negative review. And that's because of the change within the last year regarding going from Windows Live to Steam-based server connections. And it's caused a bunch of problems to the point where the community has said, this is unplayable at this point. We can't recommend this game. So if somebody goes and looks at the PC version of Ultra Street Fighter 4 in review right now, they'll probably see a good score if it's not on Steam in terms of like Metacritic. On the other hand, if you go to the Steam store, it will show you negative, 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 negative based on their algorithm right now. So I do think that does serve a purpose in terms of the updated review. Again, we have a lot of situations where, your ideas and in the status of the game changes. Trying to review TF2 after all this time, I would still give it a great score, although it's obviously a lot different game than when it came out 7 years ago. There's also still the politics portion, and I think that's where I'm still concerned about, is the fact that when it comes to politics, I mean, I like Christ Center's gamer review scores in terms of that. I do think that you try to separate your personal bias as much as you can in terms of politics. If you don't like a game's content because of X, because of, let's say, Bayonetta's sexualization, I don't think that should really play a huge part into the review score in terms of if you have a problem with it. I think you should mention in the review that if you are uncomfortable with that kind of content, then yes, you probably want to mention to those people that, hey, hold on a second, this is going to be a problem. Again, this is coming back to my formal reviews on this channel. The whole enhancer portion would be to take into things like that into account. If you're uncomfortable with sexualization, Bayonetta may give you some problems. But that's where I think, again, we're still seeing a possible politics being injected into the score, and Eurogamer hasn't done that. Polygon has. I mean, Polygon has actually flaunted it. I'm really bashing on Polygon, but I really do think Polygon is the worst defender on this. So, in the end, what is my opinion on the whole review situation? Well, I know Total Biscuit has said that reviews, the whole Metacritic portion needs to go away, and I do agree with that. I do agree that Metacritic has been a real nasty portion in the industry of what kind of consequences it has. Like, for example, the whole Fallout New Vegas portion where you saw politics come into play, and that actually affected a developer's bottom line, where they didn't get a bonus because they were 1 point off of the score, and you saw reviews which basically said this isn't developed by Bethesda, therefore I'm not going to give it a good score. That kind of stuff needs to stop. And I do think that when it comes down to it, the scoring system with like Metacritic, the problem is that you're not on the same basis. GameSpot and IGN, it was a good example in the last TB podcast. Their high scores in terms of what they use on 10s, 9s, and 8s are completely different. Like, you'll see GameSpot go down to 1s a lot more than they've just put another 1 score out in Raven's Cry than IGN would. And trying to compare them and put them all into a Metacritic score is just sort of stupid at that point. Now, on the other hand, though, I do think that the scoring system does have a place in the industry when it's done right. And I think that's where the issue comes. If it's done right, if the score is subjective in terms of it doesn't let politics come into play, it uses all the information it had at the time, and it uses everybody's on a fair playing field in terms of what's going on. Again, there are smaller publishers or smaller gaming sites, luckily not TechRaptor, luckily, where they could be pressured into giving a game a higher score because they may not get a review copy from a publisher at that point, and that's wrong. I got to think about that when going through and asking for. I'm going to be asking review copies for from now on. I'm going to try to start doing that. On the flip side of that, I have no problem with saying that, this is my opinion. This is my job to give that information to you. If they really want to stop giving me review copies, then that's fine. That's no problem to me. I'll go and pick up the game and give you guys the opinion later on at that point. I do admit that it would be nice to get a review copy only because I'll have more time with the game, I'll have more content, and I'll be able to maybe give a better representation of the game rather than a first impressions kind of portion. But again, it comes down to whether or not the playing field's even. I don't think the playing field's even, unfortunately. So I sort of just wanted to rant on this. I mean, it is an interesting place. I did want to sort of highlight the negatives of it. I've seen a lot of good feedback, and I do agree. It is a good step in the right direction in terms of the industry. However, I don't think people realize that review scores can still be useful. They can be useful if they're done right. All right, this is Dragnix signing out. I hope you guys were willing to listen to this whole little rant here. I know this is not a first impressions video. My Wednesday is going to be hectic, so I wanted to put a video up, and I didn't have anything else other to cover at this point. So here you go. All right, this is Dragnix signing out, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Hey, thanks for watching. If you have a chance, leave some feedback and comments below. If you liked the video, hit that like button. And if you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button. This is Dragnix signing off, hoping that gaming brings as much fun to you as it does for me.